The miracle peptides aren't ruining lives. The silence around them is. Because what happens after they work is the part no one warns you about. Cortino here. I'm a mindset and identity coach. I currently work inside a metabolic health and peptides company, and I even take peptides myself. And over 10 years of coaching people through divorce, identity crisis, transformation, I watched a pattern destroy relationships from the inside out. A pattern no one in this industry is talking about. In this video, I'm gonna break down exactly what peptides are doing beneath the surface, why so many people find themselves in relationship collapse right after the transformation hits, and what no one tells you about before you start. Every before and after you've ever seen in this industry shows you one thing: the body changed. It never shows you the relationship status before and after. It never shows you the mental state. And it never shows you how the person was showing up in their marriage at month 3 versus month 6. It doesn't show you the protocols that failed before the right one worked. It doesn't show you the emotional fallout from trying the wrong compound. And it definitely doesn't show you what happened to the connection to their partner when the reward system recalibrated and no one told them it was going to be coming. And I understand why this industry does this. This space has been burned by bad actors and bad compounds. They lead with the positive because they've been fighting the negative for years. But the result is the same. You see a body transformation and you assume a life transformation. And those two are completely different things. So here's the thing: the compounds aren't the scam. The story they're selling you about what these compounds will do for your life, that's where the scam lives. They're selling you a body and implying that you'll get a life. So if the marketing is selling a miracle, what happens when people actually buy it? Here's the miracle people are actually buying. If I fix my body, I fix everything. If I lose the weight, the marriage gets better. If I get the energy back, the depression lifts. If I look the way I used to look, I'll feel the way I used to feel. Well, that miracle doesn't exist. Not because the compounds failed, because transformation doesn't stop at the body. It never has. I see this from my chair inside the company and in my practice every single week. Someone starts protocol, the body changes, energy comes back. They start looking in the mirror and seeing someone they haven't seen in years. And right around month 3 or 4, that's when I get the call. And it's never the compound didn't work. It's the opposite. The compound worked. And now they're more confused than when they started. Something is wrong with my marriage. I don't feel connected to my partner anymore. I got everything I wanted and I've never felt more lost. Listen, these aren't broken people. These are people who bought the miracle, fixed the body, fixed the life, and discovered that the after photo is not the finish line. It's the starting line of something nobody prepared them for. See, I've been coaching people through transformations for 10 years. Weight loss, sobriety, spiritual awakening, divorce recovery, and I have never had someone come to me and say, I transformed and everything got easier, got better. Not once. It's always, I transformed and now nothing makes sense. And if you think this is just my coaching experience talking, the research is catching up. A pharmacovigilance study analyzed over 2 million adverse event reports. Semaglutide, the compound behind Ozempic and Wegovy, showed statistically significant signals for depressed mood, anxiety, and suicidality compared to other drugs in the same class. Those aren't my numbers. This is the largest pharmacovigilance dataset in the world. The European Medicines Agency opened a formal investigation into GLP-1 drugs as suicidal ideation back in 2023. They ultimately found no direct causal link. And I'm not here to tell you that there is one, but here's what the investigation didn't settle. The pharmacovigilance data still shows statistically significant signals for depressed mood and anxiety. Look, these drugs aren't being pulled. They're being prescribed at record scale, and the emotional effects are real. They're just not being talked about. That's the gap. Hear me out. I am not telling you everyone who takes a GLP loses their connection with their partner. What the research does say is that these compounds modulate the same reward systems that control desire, motivation, bonding, and emotional pleasure. And here's the problem with how this conversation is happening right now. Most people have heard of food noise. I've spoken about it. The idea that these drugs quiet the constant craving for food. That's the headline. But the research shows that GLP-1s don't just affect dopamine. It modulates dopamine, glutamate, and GABA, the systems that control not just food cravings, but desire, motivation, bonding, anxiety, and emotional reward across the board. Food noise is just the one that everyone talks about. Nobody's talking about relationship noise, connection noise, the quiet disappearance of drive toward the people and life you've built. In fact, a therapist I work with, a licensed colleague who refers clients back and forth with me, said something when I told her the industry is mainly using this word, anhedonia, to describe this. She laughed and said, nobody knows what that word means. And even if they do, they understand it so broadly that people are not going to recognize when they experience it. They're not going to say, I'm having conflict because I'm experiencing anhedonia. They're going to say, I just don't feel like it anymore. And by then, it's too late. That's a direct quote from a licensed therapist, and she's right. The clinical language is hiding the human experience. So what is the language? Here it is. You're not broken. You're not falling out of love. You're not suddenly seeing your partner clearly for the first time. You're in the gap. Your body moved. Your identity didn't follow. And that space in between those two things is where people lose their marriages, their careers, themselves. That gap has a name. I call it the transformation gap. And once you can name it, you can navigate it. But you can't navigate something nobody told you about, that it even existed. See, some people see this as freedom. Some people feel it as flatness, but nobody's warning people about the second possibility before they start. That's the gap. The compound, it does the job very well. It handles the body, and it does it so well. I take these things myself. But here's what nobody tells you. The body was never the hard part. The hard part is becoming the person who can hold the new body, the new confidence, the new desires without losing everything you've built before they started. The compound can't do that for you. And nobody's building that second half. That's not a failure of the product or the compound. That's a failure of the system around it. So are you noticing the same patterns? If so, I'm taking a few consultation calls. You may click on the first link in the description. So now you know the gap exists. What happens to people who figure that out mid-protocol? And what happens to the ones who don't? When someone gets great results on a protocol and then suddenly drops off, misses doses, skips appointments, falls back into old patterns, you know what the industry calls this? A compliance problem. The reason my role was created is because the company recognized that people were falling off their protocols, and nobody on the team had the skills to understand why. They knew it wasn't just about the compound. They just didn't have the language for what it actually was, but they knew something was missing. That's where I come in. But here's what I found that nobody expected. The people pulling back weren't the ones who couldn't handle the protocol. They were the ones who had already done real inner work, sobriety, divorce recovery, serious healing. They had self-awareness. They had something to lose, a relationship they had rebuilt, a career, a life they'd just put back together piece by piece. The protocol worked. The body changed. And then something hit them that they didn't have a name for. Fear. Not fear of failure, fear of success. Because the transformation wasn't just changing their body. It was stripping away the last version of themselves they'd been holding on to. The identity they built their entire healing around. And letting go of that final layer is the scariest thing a human being can do. Michael Singer said the only way to get past something is to go through it. Yes, the way out is through. But when you're standing at the door and you can feel everything you know about yourself about to change, most people don't walk through. They run back. And when I actually sat with these people, here's what came out. Not the compound didn't work. It was, I don't know who I am anymore. It was, my family is scared of me. It was, I read that everyone gains the weight back anyway. See, the mind did what the mind always does. It built a case. They were terrified, and the algorithm fed the terror right back to them. They found one post, one article, one horror story that gave them permission to stop. There is a show called Barry, and if you haven't seen it, here's all you need to know. A hitman makes a vow to stop killing people, but suddenly, he doesn't want to keep that vow anymore. So he listens to podcast after podcast until he finds the one soundbite that gives him permission to do what he already wanted to do. He scrolls past everything that challenges him. Here's one sentence, takes it completely out of context, and goes right back to the old behavior. That's what people do when you're listening to the algorithm. Not looking for truth. Looking for confirmation of fear they were already feeling. The industry counts these people as failures, non-compliant, lost revenue. I count them as proof that the body is the easy part, and nobody has built anything for the hard part. Now, the people who stay on the protocol and the ones who don't drop off, are they in the clear? Not even close. Listen to me. Here's the pattern I see on repeat. Someone starts the protocol, results come in, the body changes, confidence arrives, and then I get the speech. And if you're honest with yourself right now, you might recognize it. It sounds like, my spouse is abusive. They're a narcissist. They're selfish. Honestly, I always knew it was a mistake, and for 20 years, I just swallowed it. My friends and family always hated them too, but my partner brainwashed me. I realize that now. You know, I used to be successful and independent, but they tricked me, and I don't need them anymore. I love myself. My friends all want me out. They remind me I can have anything and anyone I want. And when I look in the mirror, now I believe it. I deserve to be happy. I'm living my best version. So they can get on board, or I'm gonna do it anyway. Unfortunately, I've heard that speech more times than I care to hear it. Different words every time, same structure, same verdict. And the first thing I ask them is this: how many times have you told that story? The room goes quiet because they realize they've been rehearsing. They've told to their friends who confirmed it, family who validated it, maybe a therapist who didn't know they were chemically altered. The algorithm fed back to them exactly what they were searching for. They've been building a case, not discovering the truth. And I need to be clear about something. I'm not mocking this. The pain is real. The frustration is real. But there's a difference between pain and diagnosis. The pain is telling you something important. But the diagnosis, the narcissist label, the brainwashing story, the I always knew, that's the mind building a case to explain the gap. Because when your body transformed and your confidence shifted and your desires changed, the easiest explanation is that the other person was always the problem. The hardest explanation, the true one, is that you changed. And you're standing in a gap between who you were and who you're becoming. And nobody told you that gap existed. And I want to show you what this looks like when it plays out all the way. Not just with peptides, we do this is why we're human, but with the same pattern wearing a different mask. I coached someone through a devastating divorce. Check this out. World-class yoga instructor, travels the world teaching other instructors. The marriage ended after 14 years. And this person, they had every label ready. Narcissist, cheater, toxic, manipulative. Their network confirmed all of it. So when the divorce was final, it felt like freedom. But here's what happened after the divorced AF party. The freedom turned into chasing. You know, using other people to try and fill a hole that was always theirs. And I want to pause again here. I am not judging that behavior. I was the one person in their life who didn't judge it. That's why they could tell me the truth. The truth was this: they knew something was wrong, and they felt shame after every cycle. But when the trigger hit, the validation kicked in. I deserve to be happy. And the pattern repeated. And this isn't a gender thing. I have watched men and women do this exact same thing for over 10 years. The behavior looks different. The pattern underneath is identical. In this one's case, 4 relationships back to back after the divorce, same cycle every time. Fall fast. Then eventually project the ex's patterns onto the new person. And when that person didn't respond to a text or show up perfectly, the verdict, well, was already written. They're just like my ex, but the common denominator was never on their list. Now, when we finally did this work together, the real identity work, not more label throwing, what we found was generational pain that had never been addressed, an identity that had stopped developing, and here's the part that stopped me cold. A yoga practice that had been worked from the outside in for years. World-class level, teaching teachers, and the lens had stopped turning inward. I taught this person, I reminded this person to approach their practice like a beginner again, from the inside out, as within, so without. And everything shifted. Eventually stabilized, eventually met someone new and remarried. 3 years strong now, by the way. And this doesn't just happen with peptides or yoga instructors. I've seen this pattern over and over and over again. People getting sober, then leaving their marriage. People leaving their faith in men's and women's retreats, in week-long seminars like Tony Robbins, especially in single-gender masterminds where someone has a breakthrough on Sunday and files for divorce on Wednesday. Same gap, different door. Someone transforms on the outside and assumes the inside will follow, but it never does. Not without the real work. So if this pattern, if the person next to you always becomes the target, where does the real scam actually live? It's not in the compound. I hope you get that by now. Not in the lab either. Not even in the marketing, although marketing has its part to play. The scam lives in the conversation that doesn't exist. Nobody sits you down before you start these and says, when your body changes, your identity will change. Everything will change. Your desires will change. Your relationships will change. You might look at your partner and feel nothing. You might look at your life and think, this isn't mine anymore. And that's normal. Hear me, that is so normal. That is predictable. And because of this, it's navigable if someone helps you through it. But that conversation doesn't exist anywhere in the industry. Not on the intake, not in the consultation, and certainly not in the follow-up. Nowhere. I wasn't hired because the compound is dangerous. I was hired because someone at the top of the company had seen what happens when these powerful compounds work and nobody catches what comes after. They saw identity crisis. They just didn't know it. They saw the relationship strain. People hitting their goals, hitting their weight, falling apart on the inside. And they knew the industry needed someone on the other side of this transformation. That's why my role was created. Not because the compound failed, because it succeeded and nobody was building anything for what comes next. My job, the fact that it even exists, is the industry admitting that these powerful compounds alone aren't enough. Nobody in the industry has figured out how to say that yet. But my paycheck is the proof. And I have a process that walks people through it. It disrupts the story that they've been rehearsing. The story about the narcissistic partner. The story about finally being free. The story that gets longer and longer and more rehearsed every time they tell it. That process is what my coaching sessions are all for. But here is what I can tell you right now for free. Take notes. If your story about your partner is getting longer, more polished, even entertaining since your transformation started, working in some jokes, that's not clarity, that's a script. And nobody around you is going to tell you that. Your friends won't, the algorithm won't, but I will. These compounds aren't the scam, the silence is. And I exist to break that silence. So the question is, what should you actually know before you start? I'm not here to scare you away from peptides. I take them, I believe in them. I've seen them change and save lives, but I've also seen them destroy marriages, fracture identities, and leave people more lost than they were before. Not because the compound failed, but because nobody prepared them. So here's what I want you to know before you start. These powerful compounds will change your body. They will also change how you connect, how you desire, how you see your partner, how you see yourself. And if nobody is helping you navigate that shift, you will make permanent decisions based on temporary chemistry, and nobody will stop you. Nobody will even tell you it's happening. I take these compounds myself. I work inside the building and I sit across from people who get results and can't figure out why they're so damn unhappy. But this didn't start with me on peptides, by the way. I used to be a stage performer. My body was part of my identity. And every time I transformed physically, my relationships broke. I've been on testosterone since my early 20s because my levels were so dangerously low medically, but the system ignored me until I had to figure it out on my own. So yeah, I've invested over $50,000 over 25 years in my own healing, spiritual, physical, identity. I've led men through transformation weekends. I've led people through Buddhist practice in organizations that I ran across 3 cities. I've coached over 200 people through divorce, relationship crisis, spiritual awakening, and identity transformation. And I've been in the gap so many times, I can see it before the person sitting across from me can even name it. That's why you should listen to what I'm telling you. And here's why I'm putting this on camera. If we just know about what these compounds do beyond the body and know that we should be working on ourselves while we're taking them, we're going to save lives. We're going to save families. We're going to save marriages. Or if the transformation still does lead to a divorce, it's going to be healthy. It's going to be amicable. It's going to be genuinely inspired by real empowerment, not reactive anger, not name calling, and not trending labels used as weapons. That changes lives, and that changes the world. That's not a scam. That's a gap, and the gap is closable. If you are starting to question your relationship after taking peptides, that's not clarity. It's a shift you don't understand yet, and the real problem hasn't even shown up. Watch this video on your screen before you make a decision you can't undo.